Good afternoon. Welcome to this Dean of Student Affairs Leadership Conversation. I am Jerome September, Dean of Student Affairs at the University of the Witwatersrand. Special welcome this afternoon to all my colleagues from across the country, to students, student leaders from both WITS and beyond, and of course a special welcome also to all our panelists this afternoon, a group of student leaders who are doing big things in their respective spaces. We are really honored to have them with us, and more importantly, we are honored to hear from them, to learn from their experiences, and to see what those experiences might mean for us. We, as a country in 1997, we accepted, or we agreed, that student leadership and the role of students are so important to the governance of higher education that we recognized SRCs formally through the Higher Education Act. This act ushered in a new relationship, a new way of relating. And it essentially acknowledged that students are co-contributors, co-drivers, co-governors of higher education and of higher education institutions. And so SRCs are statutory bodies. They are elected annually, and their role in essence is to represent the aspirations of students, their dreams, their hopes, but also to advocate for the rights of students, to raise the challenges that students face with the aim of improving the student experience. This is an important role, and we know that many leaders in our society have come through SRC ranks as a way of taking on much bigger leadership positions beyond universities. These journeys, we know they can be tough. We know these journeys challenge our student leaders to be the very best that they can be, to tap into the reserves. It pushes them. It gives them sleepless nights, I'm sure, in many contexts. And that is in the best of years. And then come 2020, and we hit with a global pandemic. A pandemic that has seen the unprecedented actions of countries being closed, of universities being closed. And to take a side note at the comrade who will be speaking soon, Thabo, Thabo and SARS, I think at the beginning of the year, called for a shutdown of the system. And then coronavirus says, well, actually, I'm shutting your country down. I'm shutting the world down. Unprecedented. Unprecedented. What does that mean for how we lead? What does that mean for how we respond to issues? What does that mean for constituency affairs? What does that mean for your own leadership trajectory, your own leadership journey? These are some of the questions that we've asked our student leaders to reflect on. We're doing this conversation as part of a bigger conversation at WITS and a bigger series at WITS called the WITS Dean of Student Affairs as Leadership Conversations. The idea is to expose our students to women and men in leadership across the globe, and to give them a sense of both contextual issues, but also what the leadership lessons in each one of these journeys are. We started the series off, so we started off with Miss Universe, Zozibini Tunsi. We then went to Nono Sekhoto, an agriculturalist, an agribusiness. We then went and had a wonderful conversation with Mary Vilakazi, COO of RMB. We then went to Linda Mafu, who is a manager at the Global Fund, particularly responsible for social and political activism. We had a wonderful conversation with Professor Shabir Mahdi, who is leading the pandemic, who is leading the vaccine development program. And so we've had wonderful, wonderful conversations. Of course, Judith Lamini, our chancellor, was also part of that lineup of wonderful, insightful conversations, lessons for students to take from, to reflect on, to see what that might mean for their own journeys. But today, we're talking to the student leaders themselves, men and women who were at the forefront on their campuses and nationally of leading, of reminding us of context, of challenging universities, of advocating for students, and of really wanting to make sure that truly no student is left behind. And we've asked them to share in their journeys, their context and their journeys, their lessons, and we trust that we will have a wonderful conversation this afternoon. This conversation is being recorded, and so you will get also a copy of the recording. To the participants, and the numbers keep on increasing, but to the participants now well over 100, to you, you can post your questions in the question and answer box, and after we've had reflections from our student leaders, we will then come back to you and we will then look at those questions, and that's really how the conversation will unfold. So in the question and answer box, if you can place your questions there. I'm now going to introduce the student leaders, and I'm going to take them as they are on my sheet of paper. We're going to start with our national student leader who's in the conversation with SAUS, Thabo. Thabo is a former SRC president at the University of Pretoria. He's currently on the SAUS. SAUS is the South African Union of Students. He's the national spokesperson of SAUS. He's a Mandela Rhodes Scholar. He is a Master's of Political Science in UP student and an MA in Public Policy at the Sciences Po in Paris, France. He's also a member of the PSET, that's the Post-School Education Tertiary Sector COVID-19 Ministerial Task Team. Welcome, Thabo, and thank you for making the time available. Our next panelist is Gift Chauke. Gift is SRC President at the University of Venda. He's a BA Honours in African Languages student, chairperson of the African ANC Youth League, and is a member of the Council of the University of Venda. Gift, if you can just show us your face and wave at the people. Our next speaker, there we go, thank you, Gift. We have Katlego. Katlego is the president of the SRC at Rhodes University, born in Limpopo, graduated with a bachelor degree in pharmacy at Rhodes, and is currently pursuing a master's in pharmaceutical chemistry. She's captained the Rhodes female basket team for the last 4 years and has held many leadership positions during her time at Rhodes, such as being a faculty rep, vice chair of the USA Eastern Cape Basketball, SRC Sports and Societies Counselor. She's recipient of 2 prestigious awards, which is the Rhodes Investec Top 100 Awards for Leadership and Sports. And she's features in the Rhodes Music Radio Station show for health segment that seeks to promote public health. And Katlego is proudly an intersectionalist feminist with a passion for serving the country. Thank you for being with us this afternoon, Katlego. Our next panelist, if she can switch her camera on, Ntesang. Ntesang is a 4th year Bachelor of Education student at Soplaki University. So in the 2019-2020 SRC elections, she emerged as Transformation and Student Development Officer, but upon their return to campus, there was a coup that took place. Upon a return to campus, there was a portfolio rethinking, and the SRC thought it best to entrust the portfolio of SRC President to Ntesang. That makes her the first woman president at Solplaatje University. She also has held a number of positions on the Solplaatje campus. She's involved in NGO work where she encourages reading in particular. She's participated in the Emerging Leaders Program, and she has just been announced as one of the delegates, of the South African delegates for the Global Model United Nations Conference that will take place next year, February, in Bangkok. Our last speaker is my own president. We were at a function earlier when someone referred to me as a minister, and I said to the president, Tuto, that I am a minister in his cabinet, I hope. Tuto is the current president of the WITS SRC. He has led in various capacities of student governance at WITS, which include deputy chair of the School of Molecular and Cell Biology in his undergraduate studies, and most recently as chairperson of the Law Students' Council that was this year. He holds a bachelor's degree in biological sciences, majoring in biochemistry and physiology, and is currently a third-year LLB student. He hails from a small village in the northwest called Marukweng, where he's also for the past 3 years been executive student representative of an NGO that focuses on youth motivation and development called the Kupano Youth Club. He's a rural young man who came to WITS for the first time in 2016. He's driven and determined on the ideals of inclusivity and equality, particularly driven by the importance of youth development and inclusion with specific attendance to the injustices of the past and how we progressively drive through the results thereof to create a better world. So colleagues, friends, those are our distinguished panelists this afternoon. We look forward to hearing from them. And so we're gonna dive right in, and I am gonna ask Tuto if he can start us off with a little bit of maybe your institutional context, but if you can respond to the topic, how has this global pandemic shaped your leadership? I ask the other panelists, you can switch off so long, and the focus will come back on you when it's your time to speak. Over to you, Tuto.
Thank you very much, Jerome September, for the introduction. Greetings to the panelists and yourselves and all the participants who are joining us today. And thank you very much for the opportunity to reflect on what I think is our personal reflections of how we have attempted to lead through and beyond, I hope, the pandemic. And I think the first point I must start at is to reflect on how, when the opportunity to lead student comes by, and when it came by, particularly to some of us, it required us to be as authentic as we can be. I remember when I was elected last year, I was elected in March of 2019 as the Law Students' Council chairperson. And later that year, I was then asked to take over the responsibility of being SRC president. So there was a short space of time where one had to come to the party, one had to respond to the challenges that were there, and one had to be as authentic as one can be. I think I want to do my reflections twofold, because at WITS, our SRC elections happen now in September, October, and the term of office starts in November to the other November. So it's November 1st to October 30th of each year. So we at WITS University have had the opportunity to have both sides of the coin of leadership in this very difficult year of leading. We have had the opportunity to lead both physically on campus, where we frustrated here and there physically, and we have also had the opportunity to lead online. And I must say, I want to do the two reflections based on those two premises of the fact that we were given the opportunity to lead both physical and in an online platform. And I want to say from the onset that I think the analogy that student leaders have created, that COVID-19 has been our worst enemy, must be done away with, because I think, in my view, the pandemic has given us opportunities to lead differently. The pandemic has given us opportunities to do stuff differently. The first reflection I want to make, with the context of both physical and online, is how there is a need for every student leader that comes onto a platform of leadership to be able to know the art of lobbying. When I was inducted for this SRC, I was told that the art of lobbying is one of the most important and critical things, not only lobbying amongst yourselves as colleagues, but also lobbying stakeholders, the university, and many other people. And I was making a reflection to say, when we were physically on campus, when we attended stuff like Council of the University, Senate of the University, for instance, which is highly dominated by academics who are, I dare say, in the main white and very difficult to lobby. We were given an opportunity at the time to start strategizing around how do we lobby these groups of people who are in the university. I mean, I remember last year in one Senate meeting where the university vice chancellor was making a reflection to say that the university's transformation quarter is where the university's goals had mandated it to be. And I raised the question to the Senate room at the time to say, but the environment of the very Senate room that we're in does not reflect this transformation quota that the vice chancellor claims has been reached. So at the time, we were getting into learning new ways of challenging environments that we have never been involved in. When we go to council, you are dealing with what I like calling big guns. You must learn how to lobby them beforehand. Quick transition to when we came to the pandemic, shutdown of universities was called and all of that. There was a quick shift that had to be done. I had to move from looking at academics in Senate room and telling them eyes on that the transformation quota is not reached. I had to move from that to looking at my device and engaging on my own and the like. But the second thing as well, other than the lobbying aspect of other people, was how we had to be, as student leaders, in touch with the ground, because student leaders have always said that, in fact, I think this is an ideal that all student leaders must have, that you cannot lead them if you are not with them. And when we were physical November to March, we could go to lecture rooms and say, we are mobilizing for 1, 2, 3, 4. We could go to the Great Hall stairs and Amandla and all of those things. And we were attempting to be in touch with our ground. Quick transition to the pandemic, we had to now go to being live on Instagram, Twitter, and all of those things. But the lessons that we have learned from this pandemic must reflect how we have been taught a new style of leadership. We have been taught in this particular environment of leadership how to attend to matters. If there was an issue that we had to deal with physically, there was a quick transition to the pandemic where we had to quickly learn how to lead differently, where we had to quickly learn how to engage with our students as much as we would have intended to when we began our term of office. But the second lesson.
Okay, so I'm gonna, so you have a minute left, and then we're gonna move to the next speaker. So your second lesson?
The second lesson, I only have 3, Dean, so it won't be that much. The second lesson is the lesson to critically engage external stakeholders. I mean, we have been given the opportunity to engage with various other stakeholders, to bring them together into one place to say, this is the vision and this is the vision that must be pushed, you know? And this is reflected in the projects that we have made through this online leading. Someone called it e-learning. But the third thing, which I think is important for ourselves, is that it has sparked an interest in students realizing the importance of student leadership and student representation. Just last week, we were hosting SRC elections at Wits University. And for only the second time in a whole lot of years, we reached threshold. And in my view, it is as a result of our ability to engage with our students differently. And that has led to us being able to lead differently, but more than anything else, lead authentically. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, President. Lots of things that have come through there, and I'm going to come back to you on 1 or 2 of those. But while the others speak, I do, in the meantime, maybe just want you to think around. You said something along the lines of you had to think about a new leadership style, right? A new way of leading. And so when we have a moment, I'm going to come back to you on that one. If you could just give us a sense of what that have meant to you. Okay, our next speaker, also for about 6 or so minutes, our next speaker is Ntesang. Over to you.
Thank you, Dean of Student Affairs in Wits University. Before I can start with my reflection, I would just like to take this wonderful opportunity that we have been granted as presidents. I must say that when the invite came, I'm like, whoa, I think I've made it in life because, wow, Wits SPU, you know. But let me also take this wonderful opportunity to thank everybody who has joined in, more especially the ones from my university. The theme for today's conversation, leading authentically. And when I think about the word authentic, it means that you cannot be anybody else. It has been 105 days since I have been elected to serve as the first female SRC president in our university. Unfortunately, when I was elected, our students were at home, online learning had its things, and many things have changed, including the way we are relating to each other in our residences. Above all these things that have changed, one thing that remained true is who I am. I think what the pandemic did for me is it gave me an opportunity to step back into myself and reflect what it means to be a leader. The notion of leadership and student activism for me changed drastically. Because at first, in my first year, I thought student activism means making noise, singing, chanting struggle songs. That is what I perceived as student activism. Now COVID-19 came. Now we had to redefine what student activism means. One thing that I've learned from e-leading or leading via online engagement is that you need to be on the ground. Like Tuto has mentioned, you cannot lead people if you're not in touch with them. You need to have the heart for serving first, and you also need to reflect, why do you serve as a student leader? Is it because many people like you? Is it because you've got lots of followers on social media? Is it because you can be loud? Or is it because naturally you have the heart to serve? One thing that we pride ourselves with in Solplac University is learning, serving, and pioneering. As a developing university, we have been given a chance to construct or create opportunities that might not have existed before. Dean of Student Affairs, please allow me to share with the participants how my journey in student leadership came about. When you introduced me, you mentioned that I was also a participant for the Emerging Student Leaders Program, which was then facilitated by you when you were still the head of student affairs in our university. One thing that you've taught me in my first year is that student leadership is not only about SRC. From that notion, I've learned to build myself before I could be elected into this office. I've learned to be on the ground with students, be part of the SPU community, actively engaged. In that way, you learn the structures and the systems or processes that are already in place so that when you get into SRC, you already have a better understanding of how you should conduct yourself as a student leader, more especially in an institution of higher learning. One thing that I've also learned, Dean, is that you need to be your own cheerleader. And that is what I've learned through my journey as the first female SRC president. I did not have any other president that I could look up to, or even someone who could serve as my role model. That means I started a way that has never been walked on before. Now that means I needed to ask myself, what kind of leadership am I going to embrace? What kind of leadership style am I going to embrace? And what kind of leader am I going to be? One thing that I've learned from my education studies is that you cannot be a leader if you can't even lead your own life. That means student leadership also gives you an opportunity to reflect on your own conduct as a person, not the SRC president, not the SRC, any other title that you might hold, but as an individual, where nobody can see you. What kind of person are you? Are you the person that you go out there and be out and speak out with people? So that means the reflection of student leadership and your personal conduct needs to be on the same balancing beam. You cannot be, or you cannot even serve from an empty cup. You cannot tell people how to be if you're not that person. The usual saying goes, practice what you preach. And that is what I've learned from leading as the SRC president. You can't tell people anything that you've never implemented in your life. In conclusion.
So in Desang, also a minute left for you, okay?
In conclusion, Dean, I've learned that students need an authentic person. I've asked one of my classmates, how do I become a president? I've never been a president of anything before. This is my first presidency and probably not the last. But what I got, the response that I got from his classmate, a very close friend of mine, is that students need Intasang. They don't need Intasang president. They don't need Intasang with a title. They need you to be you. That is why today, when I reflect on authentic leadership, I take note that honestly, they don't need anybody else. They need you. And that is why they elected you without a title before. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Desang. Similar as with Tuto, there's one or two thoughts that I want to come back to. Your reflection very much being around authentic leadership and what that has meant for you in your context as a first woman student leader, first female, not student leader, but first women SRC president. I would like to come back to you and explore there's a powerful phrase you used. You spoke about the journey, the connection with self, and the importance that you need to look inwards so that from the inward looking, you are able to lead outwards. And so the self-leadership and how that has impacted on your journey in leading the students. So if you could just maybe begin to think around that, because I think that that's been an important one, an important other dimension that you've now already brought into the conversation. Our next speaker from the University of Venda, Gift, over to you.
Yes. Getting to the deans of students, vice panelists, and entire audience. My name is Choge Gift from University of Venda. I want to start addressing you when we became to power in the office last year, 2019. When we came to power, we were not wanted by opposition, by management, by people who have authority. And remember, I'm from a traditional and rural-based university. By saying that I'm from traditional and rural-based universities, that the university has got its own tradition on how it must be governed and how it must go forward. In the University of Venda, when you're in the leadership, there's a lot we learn when you're in the leadership, because there's nothing that can happen without a strike. Like you cannot be able to go forward without any forms of demonstration that now we're leading students, this is our problems. So today's topic intend to explore one's journey and navigating ourselves out of this global pandemics of COVID-19. When, as I said, that University of Venda is a traditional and rural-based university, when the COVID arrives, it just hit us without knowing, because it was just a surprise. In University of Venda, we have students that stays in communities, in villages where there's no network. When the Vice Chancellor of University of Venda announced the shutdown, that in 2 days, students must vacate a campus, I had the students who were affected by REC and academic exclusion who were not registered by them. I had the students who were affected by N+2 rules. They were no longer funded. They were supposed to be funded. Now these people are going home to villages where there's no network. And as the middleman, as the president, I must communicate. They communicate with me. I must send communication to the management. And I should say this, that the dean of the director of student affairs here, Mr. Shkud, assisted with time, because he could come to task and try to be the middleman also, because it was very much hard. Because you can send an email today of a student who wants to register and get a response after 2 weeks. So you can imagine what's happening on that 2 weeks between me and a student. That's where we're valued useless. Because while you're a president, I've given you my information that I want to register, I'm affected by REC, but you're not doing anything. And it's not necessarily like I'm not doing anything. I'm sending an email to Dean of Student, the person who must register. Remember, my duty is to represent, I'm representing student. And as pandemic, everybody's home, we're working online here. Now, a Dean of Student will tell you that I have not yet received your email. Let me just say it, because in University of Venda, we had a staff member who can't operate an internet or a computer or use technology. But that person is working here in the University of Venda. So you'll imagine what was happening. And in our SRC, I think in our SRC we have 14 to 16 members, cabinet members. We have 6 in our organization. We have 6 opposition. Those 6 opposition, because their duties to oppose in the SRC, they have put their tools down and say, no. We are not interested in this thing. We didn't win election. 6 of you must continue. Out of that 6, 4 of us, 4 of them, of our comrades, they went home. Sometimes they do not have data. Sometimes there's no network because they're from villages. Mina, where I came from in Papazela, network is a problem. I want to tell you one story that I only spent 3 weeks at home. 3 weeks after they've announced lockdown. I had to return back with the secretary because I needed internet and Wi-Fi in campus. And I was alone here in campus because my secretary is from Eastern Cape, then he couldn't fly back because everything was closed, was on shutdown. So imagine how difficult was this, because I came here because of the pressure students were giving me to say, there's something that you can do. And remember, I've told you that in University of Venda, it's a traditional and rural-based university where when you need something, you must then close the gate. And he said, there's no one is entering, you are shutting down the campus. It is when they can say, I now will assist you there and there. You understand? That's the tradition. And I will not go out of the office before I change it. I will not leave this office before I change it. Now it continuously that we're now in level 3 of lockdown. I've got more than 2,000 students unregistered. I've got more than 1,000 students without rooms. I've got students who are affected by N+2 rules. You understand? So it is very much difficult. Here, this side, you are working with people who want to put you under the bus, who do not want to see you prospering on the issues, like championing student interest. They can just intentionally put you under the bus, set you for a fail. This side of my organization, they're telling us that there's nothing you're doing. And remember, I told you that when we came to power, nobody wanted us. We just came because we said, it's fine, we don't need anyone's support to lead the student. We must just become ourselves and lead the student. So it was very much difficult when we start this thing. So these things of a pandemic actually dealt with my leadership. It made me to be valued useless because there was no communication between us and the management, and there was communication breakdown. You can send the SMSs get responded after 3 weeks. You can send emails, an email don't get responded. You can call and you don't find a person. And the person tells you that I was not having network. As I told you that University of Venda, it's based in rural, in villages, in China, in Toyando. Network is a problem at this side. So these things of online learning came now. It came now into a picture now that we have to rescue the 2020 academic year. Now you're the president and now you must assist us to students to cooperate. I have a student who does not have a gadget, and that student must write an assignment online. That person does not have any assistant. That person is affected by N+2+. That is saying you are excluded from NSFAS. You no longer have funding. This person does not have a gadget. This person at home, they only rely in social grant. Now, who's buying that student died? Then we were lucky when this thing was going, the minister announced that is going to buy data for all funded students. But still again, a person who's affected by N+2 couldn't afford data because that person is not funded. And the issue of N+2 must be sorted by me and financial aid, which financial aid is not willing to assist us now. You see now we're stuck. We are having a student without a gadget. We're having a student without data. We're having a student without the funding. Some, they're not even registered, they're just doing schoolwork, hoping that when things change, because we do not know how it's going to change, we'll then register, you understand? Therefore, as the SRC, we sat down, let me just say, not as the SRC. Me and the secretary, we sat down with the online officials through Teams with the student affairs and transversal committee with Department of ICT, and say, we have a student. These students are not funded. They cannot therefore get data from the minister's announcement. At home, they rely on child grants. They can only buy maize meal. They can't buy data. And this student, they must participate in an academic year. We therefore took our 1 million from our budget and we gave it to the institution that we must buy student data for 6 months. And a student, everyone in the University of Venda was bought data through our SRC man. When students were affected by N+2 rule, N+2 rule is an exclusion from NSFAS that you have exceeded your years of study. Therefore, NSFAS can't continue funding you. We donated another 1 million. And not like it was simple, it was very hard to donate this 1 million because this money is taken from student man. And this money is generated through students who are registered already. We are taking 1 million.
You have a minute left, a minute left.
Or 1 minute left. No, let me conclude by saying that this year, COVID-19 has brought soaring tears to us, especially us who are rural-based university, who are just disadvantaged, who are very far from things. Even a spokesperson of South can even say it clearly that when we come to universities, we end with University of Venda because we think it's in University of Zimbabwe, it's next to Zimbabwe. There's nothing we're getting. Support, there's nothing. Everything ends with us. Even today, I'm telling you that I've just got an approved appeal of N+2 from NSFAS yesterday. I just got it yesterday. Other universities, they've solved everything. You understand? In University of Vienna, that's what I face. And we're sending emails every day. They choose to reply to those they have studied from. Because I don't have anyone from NSFAS who have studied in University of Vienna. Therefore, if VET send an N+2 list for appeals, we'll sort VET first before University of Vienna. And that is disadvantage our leaders.
You know, we can come back to you as well, and I'm keeping my other eye on the time because I do want us to come to these questions. But firstly, I want to say thank you for the honesty with which you shared. I mean, you've really given us a great sense of the context that you're finding yourself in, and of the challenges that students in your space face. I do want you to reflect, and when I come back, I do want you to reflect on one statement that you made, which I want to challenge you on. You said, this COVID has made me a useless leader, or something along those lines. It has made us useless. It has made me useless. It was something along those lines. I might not have the right wording. But I want you to think about that maybe with eyes, or maybe with a mindset that is maybe slightly gentler on yourself, because towards the end, you then start talking about the wonderful things that you have done, right? So the R1 million towards data, the R1 million to support the N+2 students, the advocating for the student whose appeal had now finally been successful, the only being home for 3 weeks and then coming back to campus to advocate for students. So I want you to think about that statement on your leadership. And if you could perhaps, when I come back, give us a sense of why you, even in that context, say, I was useless. When me as an outsider think, actually, given the context that you've sketched, you've actually raised to the challenge, you've arisen to the challenge. So just think about that. Our next speaker is Katlego from Rhodes. Over to you, Katlego. Your 5 or so minutes start now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jerome, for this opportunity. Let me first start by greeting the panelists and also the attendees from Rhodes and from all over the country. Just to give a context of Rhodes, Rhodes University is one of the smallest universities in South Africa, with just about plus 8,000 students. And like many other institutions of higher learning, it was greatly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And therefore, as the university, we had to quickly adapt to this change and plan how we can smoothly transition into virtual learning. And I must express that it was not easy for everyone because the situation that we found ourselves in was very much unprecedented. So I just want to give a brief reflection of the reality of our campus before COVID-19. And that is, students had support and access to quite a lot of things. And that includes the first one being, we had 24-hour computer labs and library for studying. The resident system is quite the best in the country, where you have mostly single rooms. You have unlimited Wi-Fi, you have 3 meals per day, You can change your linen every week. So you can imagine what kind of environment student had before COVID-19. And also student had close proximity to lecturers and tutors. So consultations was very easy. And one other thing is that we also have access to counseling center. So Rhodes has always ensured that students are supported throughout their university life by making the environment very comfortable as it can be. So as a student, you don't have to worry about a lot of things but your books. So you can imagine how this period has harshly affected many students, especially those who have no resources and are in non-conducive environments. So in an attempt to save the academic year of 2020, the university started by conducting a survey. This was to establish how many students have access to the devices that can be used to participate in the virtual learning. So the survey revealed that about 300 students reported to not have the internet-enabled devices. But of course, this might have not been a true reflection because not all students responded to the survey. So during the whole period when COVID-19 came, the main objective of the university and also of the SRC was that no student should be left behind. So we have had constant engagement with the management to ensure that actually no student is left behind. So support was offered to students where laptops were bought and charged to student accounts, and then data was provisioned as other universities, and also hard copy materials were posted to them. And we also had online counseling sessions and also WhatsApp groups for students to be in with the tutors and also the lecturers. So just to close this off, the reflection upon inquiry, just last week, upon inquiry with the university management, it was said that the results of the students reflected that they've adjusted quite well to the online learning as compared to contact learning. So the results were quite better than as preferred to the normal circumstances. So as I've said, the SRC had to constantly engage with the university management and to ensure that support is indeed offered to each and every student and that none of them has been left behind. So what I took from this journey, I'll just start with the SRC as a whole. So as the SRC, we had to quickly adapt to this change and think of different ways of leading and reaching out to students. For example, we had to conduct a Facebook meeting, and interesting enough, the attendance, participation, and the feedback was very positive as compared to when students are called to a certain venue to attend the meeting. So that was quite positive. And some of the events and projects that we had planned for the year had to be packed because we were focusing on the transitioning and ensuring that all the students are not left behind. So in everything that we were doing, our goal remained that no students should be left behind. So we even ended up calling for students to boycott an online learning course because plus 2,000 students reported that they had not received their hard copy materials or they had not received the laptops. So we had to call for students to boycott the online learning, which was quite very tricky because students can support the movement to say, okay, we are boycotting, but because everything is virtual, you don't know who goes to the class, you don't know who does what at what time. So because everything is on social media, like you can't be sure that people are actively participating in the call to boycott online classes. So for me personally, I have grown very much as a leader. I must say, I've grown very, very much as a leader. And I don't know, maybe I have like sort of a different view to my colleagues because I can participate in protests, for example. I've been participating in protests, but personally, I've never been a protest leader. You know, I can't go in front of the protest and actually lead. So I think COVID-19 provided that platform for me to be able to lead according to my character. So that leading of always having to engage and finding solutions through engagements. And I must say that the Rhodes University Manager, there's this saying that students always say, you have been captured by management. You know, that's a saying that students always say. But for me this year, I usually used to tell my counsel, like in a joking manner, that, you know what, I actually think we have captured management. But that was in so saying that because all our suggestions or like everything was taken into account. And if things are not able to be achieved, we would ask, why is this one not achievable? They would tell us reasons why it's not achievable. And then we take it to the students. So it has always been a constant engagement between management and the university. I mean, the university management and the students. Also, there was too much pressure, like COVID-19.
1 minute.
Oh yeah, I'm finishing. The COVID-19 pandemic came with too much pressure that we had to absorb, and we needed to think on our feet because everything was trial and error, and everything was very fluid. So we had to be very flexible and adapt to change. So one interesting thing is that we always talk about these attributes in interviews or mention them on our CVs because we've experienced them on a very small scale. But I must say that COVID-19 gave us an ultimate real life experience where we had to actually put our attributes into action. So personally, key lessons that I've taken from this whole period is that and also positive professional engagements are very important because you get to learn from each other and understand. Also, one last thing is that you shouldn't let emotions to get better of you because students will always find something to drag you or cancel you for. So instead of taking that as like a negative criticism, I always strive to take it as a positive criticism. So yeah, those are the key lessons that I took from this whole period. Thank you very much, Dean.
Thank you. Thank you. That was also, again, very powerful. Thank you for sketching the pre-COVID context and then giving us a sense of what, therefore, some of the issues were. I mean, the boycott that you led and all of the dynamics around that. I think everyone is probably sitting with the question and a lesson they want to learn. How exactly did you capture management? And so, so I think when we come back, maybe some lessons that other student leaders can learn from around how you were able to have management not only listen to you, but actually also concede to some of the key things that you were wanting. So when we come back, I'd like us to explore that a bit further. I know I've seen the questions in the question and answer session. There's already 5 very powerful questions sitting there. So continue to post it there. We have one more speaker, and then we're going to have a couple of minutes to just quickly go into our answer and question session. So please do put your questions there. Our last speaker before we go to question and answer is from South. Thabo, over to you.
Good afternoon, Jerome, Dean of Students at Wits University. I think firstly, thank you very much for providing us with this, I think an important platform to, reflect more meaningfully on the last couple of months, and especially to be able, as a number of institutions are going into SRC elections in the coming weeks and so forth, to be able to continue the conversation so that, the fight against COVID is not over in the system. So when they begin to take over, they're able to learn from their outgoing leadership some of the challenges that they need to take into consideration moving forward. But before I even start, I also want to take an appreciation to acknowledge the panelists themselves and for their various contributions that they have shared. Quite interesting, of course, it was for me from a national organization, is to hear the various inputs and the various reflections, coming from the different presidents, but of course being able to also look at it within the context of their respective institutions. And there's something interesting I want to draw us to quite shortly. But I think, Jerome, just to start the conversation, I need to provide a context, and there's 2 different contexts I want to provide, right? Firstly, we need to acknowledge, like you started off by saying, I'm a former SRC president. So I led SRC at the University of Pretoria in 2015. Now, many of us would know as student activists, 2015 is more often than not remembered as that month where students shut down higher education institutions, the fallism discourse, roads must fall, Leicester, open studies, RU references, and so forth, right? And so one thing I found very interesting is that long and short behind the fees must fall protest was the immediate question of the right to learn, right? The call for access, asking how it can be a right, whereas many Black students in particular would not be able to access this particular, right, being education, because we put it to the logic of the market now. Now, if you come to the COVID-19 pandemic, the very same issues of inequality that we went to the streets to protest for in 2015 were rearing its ugly head yet again. However, interestingly, and I'm going to come at Wits at this one because I want to draw parallels with what the president of Univen, was trying to speak into, and I took that, quite interesting, quite profoundly, is that just this time around, in Fees Must Fall, when you think about 2015, the biggest blunder we make is to argue that the call for free education is located at Wits. So when you think Fees Must Fall, you think Wits University, whereas that is fundamentally wrong. It's a call that is rooted in historically Black and disadvantaged institutions, right? The struggle for access. And I'll tell you why, because when inequality rears its ugly head yet again under the COVID-19 pandemic, this time around, because the universities like Wits University are on the side of privilege, the need or the appetite to continue with the struggle for access was then left behind, or the struggle for justice rather becomes abandoned, right? So we need to look at it quite differently and think, okay, when COVID came about unannounced, closing down not just South Africa, but the entire continent, the entire world, sorry. We need to ask ourselves, what were some of the conditions that existed pre-COVID? I think the president of University of Rhodes University tried to touch on some of the pre-COVID context, right? SAWS in January of this particular year called for a national shutdown, and it's important to start it off from the January shutdown protest, right? And pretty much it was just to argue that a number of issues, the registration process in our universities was not going quite smoothly. A number of students were being left behind, and a number of these students, come from, poor backgrounds, and many of which are Black students, many of which, are grouped and camped in your historically Black universities. I'll make an example of Fort Hare. Just before COVID pandemic, Fort Hare University is amongst one of the universities which was in battle, struggled to start its academic year, even to the point where the country was shut down during COVID, right? So when the COVID period happens and they shut down all of our universities, we still have a University of Fort Hare, which had not started the academic calendar as of January that particular year. We still had the Walter Sisulu University, which in and of itself had its own particular issues. We still had the University of Venda, which had its own particular issues in that regard, right? However, this time around, because our historically white and our historically advantaged institutions had the particular privilege to respond immediately, they then set the pace and tone of what is to be assumed as what should happen with the COVID-19. I'm referring in particular to online learning. Because if we recall the debate around online learning, in fact, sitting as a member of the PSET ministerial task team, I can reflect and I think back into April. It was not the ministerial committee which decided on online learning, right? Instead, if you recall, it was the likes of Wits University, UJ, Rhodes University, Stellenbosch University, and University of Cape Town, historically advantaged, historically white institutions, right? Dipping into their perhaps, university coffers, into their university resources, and advancing students with laptops, right? I remember at some point, Wits had bought 5,000 laptops, even the negotiation around data packages. It was your historically white advantaged institutions which were able to secure your deals with your MTN and so forth at the expense of a historically Black institution. And so what tended to happen, you'll see, is that these white universities then shifted online. They have the resources, they have the capacity to do that. And then you set a very dangerous pace and tone in the higher education sector, pretty much enshrining what SAWS, identified as a two-tier system, one for the rich and the have and the have-nots, one for the haves, and one for the have-nots, right? However, when I reflect around this particular issue, even trying to resolve part of the arguments that we must not seek with the COVID-19 pandemic, we must not seek to exacerbate some of the existing institutional, inequalities. However, the complete inverse happened, right? You find arguments being thrown out by, our very elite institutions to say, no, we cannot resort to an argument of the lowest common denominator. Basically saying that, as universities, we ought to be allowed to continue because we have a contractual obligation to provide a particular service, right? But one thing we failed to do as a country, and I think even from a national level, the Department of Higher Education, and even as University of South Africa's vice chancellors, was to sit down and ask ourselves, perhaps more broadly, what are the opportunities that the COVID-19 pandemic created for us to address within the higher education sector, right? Some of the, it was, I think, when we reflect in SAWS meetings, there was an opportunity which I think we missed to, honestly address some of the, or level out basically some of the inequalities that exist in the system, as opposed to resorting on competitive advantage, right? Because it's much easier for our universities, your 5 main elite universities, Ivy universities in this country, to jump online. But it was quite debilitating to as a student leader and a spokesperson, right? To be able to grapple with the idea that Wits would want to, in the year 2020, there's a graduate at UP, a graduate at Stellenbosch, and at Fort Hare, it failed to produce a single graduate in that particular year, or the question or the qualification at Walter Sisulu University or University of Zululand might be questionable, right? These things feed into a broader system of exclusion, even in the workplace. When you go and you're looking for a job in whatever, whether you're looking for a law in a law firm, right? We need to ask ourselves, what informs a law firm having a preference for a student at Wits, at UP, at Stellenbosch, vis-a-vis a preference for the person at University of Limpopo? Part of the argument, and we thought within the COVID-19 pandemic, was that if we're allowed to entrench and to exacerbate these existing inequalities, we would not be addressing some of the calls for equity that were called upon in Fees Must Fall protest, and we will not be able to, even post-COVID, be able to fix what I think is going to be some of challenging conditions, even after this particular period. The fact that even we had some universities begin their second semester online, finishing exams, beginning their second semester, and have other universities, like I said, Fort Hare University, as late as August, having not started with the academic project in and of itself. This, of course, goes back to this thing of the Higher Education Act, right? Some of the weaknesses in the Higher Education Act, when you started off, Jerome, you had spoken about the Higher Education Act in and of itself being the driving force of transformation moving forward. What I realized, of course, from the standpoint of SAWS was the number of complexities that came about between state and the university, right? And realizing that the relationship was pretty much one fraught with many complexities, hiding behind a lot of I call jargon within the higher education space. Things like institutional autonomy, things like public accountability. At some point, we even had the deputy minister and the vice chancellor at Wits go at each other, and you ask yourself, in the midst of a global pandemic, where do we locate authority in trying to drive a more equitable thing moving forward? Where do we vest this particular authority? Universities would rather go into the higher education, into institutional autonomy, whereas we're trying to find a much more just and equitable way moving forward. And in closing, I think much like the Fees Must Fall debate, right? We realized during the global pandemic that the right to learn is compromised for many Black students across the system in many different ways by a system that is driven and shaped by business principles, right? So we're seeing the rise of the corporate university that uses economic rationality as a principle of legitimacy in terms of moving forward, right? So the idea that education is a commodity, education is a paid for commodity, right? So you're buying a particular service, and really what you're seeing is our universities competing rather unfairly in terms of who gets to sell this particular service best, hiding behind slogans. Wits gives you the edge, fly at UP, or some international standards, global rankings, this and that. Whereas at the heart of this thing was a global pandemic. We forgot that at the heart of everything here was a global pandemic, something a poor Black student did not cause, something a person coming from a rural village did not cause. And so the solutions towards this pandemic could not be at the expense of somebody at vendor with no network. And you think online learning is saving the academic calendar when I don't have data, I don't have network. We're at home. If you look into the background of my picture, I was trying to show you, at home, that is the reality of many Black families, right? Overcrowded, no network shacks, and poverty. And so when you say we're saving the academic calendar by shifting online, I think in closing, we must ask, for which institutions were we saving this particular academic calendar for? Because for the most part, the universities which are caught even now lagging are historically disadvantaged universities. The universities which are caught now at the back foot are historically disadvantaged universities. I'm sure I study at UP, students are about to conclude the second semester, write the second year final exams, or write their second semester final exams. But the idea that Fort Hare University has not even started with the second semester, for me, speaks to what does it mean to have a single coordinated higher education system, and what are the ways that we have failed, perhaps collectively, from higher education, from SRC, SAWS, and even universities. How have what opportunities were missed to speak to some of the inequalities that exist in the system? I think I'll stop there for now because I do believe that there's
I'm going to stop you, yes. Yes, thank you so much. I think you've really given us a sense of the big picture, because one can, as you rightfully point out, one can become so focused on your institutional dynamic and the interest of your individual institution that you forget the impact of your decisions on the system and how other people are affected by the decisions that you are making. And I liked that you went back to 2015. In fact, I think this week is about the 5-year anniversary, even today, I think, of when Fees Must Fall started. the context then, the context now, how things have changed, but how things have also not changed in so many ways. And so thank you for that. To you, I am going to come back, and I guess the questions I've put to everyone, if maybe you can do that as part of your closing reflection, because we only have about 20 or so minutes left. And so we are going to have to, I'm going to give you less time now to respond to questions than I did before, because I wanted us to really just get the context for this conversation right. So Thabo, for you, you've given us this rich and this really deep insight into the system. But I want to come back to you, Thabo, the individual, the student, and what has this meant for your own leadership style, for how has this shaped you as a leader, having to grapple with these really complex issues in this really complex country. So we're going to come back to you on that one. Participants, I'm not going to go and not go to the participants around my, or the panelists around my questions, but I'd rather take the questions now that you have posed. There's a lovely comment in the webinar chat to Gift. I'm not going to read the whole one. Thank you, Gift, for your sacrificial service to your student community and their particular needs. Your relentless commitments to the student cause is a humbling testament to your honor and legitimacy as a leader. Finally, may you and we all continue to build our leadership legacies on the ethical and honest foundations that you or we have begun. So just a lovely shout out there to Gift, just around him. So the first question is to Ntesang and to Tuto. And so both of you, if you could please be brief in your responses. Both Ntesang and Tuto mentioned the importance of the ideal that you need to be in touch with those you lead. However, the circumstances weren't entirely allowing for everyone to be reached online. How did the student leaders ensure that individuals from all backgrounds stay informed of the university developments, especially in the early levels of the lockdown? So both Ntesang and Tuto mentioned it, but the question is really for everyone. How did you ensure that people on the ground stayed informed? So if you can give me very brief responses. This is going to be like half a minute for those of you who want to respond to that question. Ntesang, let's take you first.
Alrighty, thank you, Dean. I'm just gonna say what I've learned is that you need to use what you have. We all have Facebook pages, Facebook accounts, WhatsApps. So what we did is that we distribute information with all the available platforms that we have so that we can be in touch with our students.
Thank you. Who else wants to come in on this one? What platforms, how did you stay in touch?
So I
we
think,
don't all come in to talk?
thanks. In addition to what Ntesang said, what we effectively did on our side was that, as she said, use what we had. We reached out to other student representative structures within the university. So your societies, I remember there was a point we went to societies and said, cultural societies, religious societies, what's your view on this? Let's do this and that. So that's another aspect that we touched on. That's in addition to the social media platforms that Ntesang has, of course, already mentioned.
Okay, thank you. So the second question is, secondly, how were they as student leaders affected in terms of personally having to transition? Okay, now my stuff have moved. Having to personally transition from contact to online learning, so your own transition, and simultaneously ensure the smooth transition of everyone else. And throughout this, so your own transition, all the students, and throughout this remain authentic to ensure that your personal mental health is also looked after. So how did you do that? Maybe if I can pull in Katlego and Gift here, how did you manage your own transition? to online or to whatever the mode was. Look out for students and make sure that your mental health is also, so the self-care. Was there any self-care in this process?
Okay, I'll go first.
Go for it.
I think this is it's a tough one. I think because if you are given a duty of representing Ed Rhodes plus 8,000 students, then it is not easy at all. It wasn't easy. But now when you put up your hand to say to people that I want to represent you, I think there are some sacrifices that come with that. And I think that's what leadership is. It comes with compromises and sacrifices. So the transitioning was not quite easy for me personally, because you had to make sure that you are like, no student is being left behind, but at the same time you have to consider yourself. So what would happen is that within, like, I usually, like within the SRC, we have exec, we have secretariat and so forth. So for secretariat is the highest decision-making body within the SRC as a whole. So what would happen is that we would work the whole week, or like for whatever time that we have committed ourselves to. And then maybe for like 2 days or 3 days, one of us taps out, you know, just to get themselves back together. So that's what we used to do, to just give each other a chance to be able to catch up with your work, or to be able to catch up with yourself. So I think teamwork is what helped in this instance. So you were able to do your job, even though, like, to tap out and the job still continues. So teamwork really did help during this period. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Any thoughts, Gift?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. September. Before I can go to that, I wanted to emphasize on why I said student valued as useless because of COVID, but I will come to that if you allow me.
Sure.
Thank you very much. I want to also address this issue. This thing is affected, and it was very much traumatic, because I also tell you that I'm a rural-based university, where things of online on its own, it's a problem compared to a fortunate university like that. Ours is disadvantaged because we are from villages, and in villages we have a problem of connectivity. The first things we raised with the university, and I'm glad that they come to us, will try to assist that, is that we're having problem with connectivity. Students are ready to learn. University of Venda is going online, but there's no connectivity. That means the online issues is a fail on its own. You understand? Now, Mar, I want to bring this into your attention that in the ICT department is assisted also partnering with student affairs and landlords, because people who had problem with network in their villages, because they are few there, they managed to bring them back to town with this coverage. Is where we began with the issue of online. But however, student can call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and tell you, hey, chief, wake up. What's wrong? I don't have data. I mean, I also don't have data. We're both students. You understand? But you had to ask that student, okay, I'm buying you this backup. I'm not even lying or want to gain. I have that leadership skills of assisting everywhere I go. I assist students everywhere I go. Maybe it's what made me special. And that's what made me survive. Despite any arrogance that we were facing when we were facing these challenges, we had to wake up in the morning and buy student data. Say, hey, chief, you are a president, we voted for you. Assist us with these things. My laptop is no longer charging. Can you take it to an Indian shop to fix it so that I can be able to participate? So we carried the burden of the university on our shoulders. The leadership was saying, no, we're in for it. Whatever happened, it has happened. We have to survive. And then I'm glad because we managed to rise above all. And then we participated in online learning very well. We finished our first semester. Now we're starting with the second semester. We're fine. We do not have problem. Mentally, we'll check after our term has ended. We'll have to go to a serious psychologist to check if our mind is still working properly. Because myself, I don't even sleep. Even now, I don't sleep. I think I sleep at 2, 3 o'clock. I'm awake. and I must solve all issues. As a leadership, there will always be issues coming to the office. And I'm glad because my director of student affairs and the visit can able to come to us and we can able to move forward with engagements. Because also leadership is about engagements. And then I want to say these things because as the SRC, here in the investment, there's no teamwork here. I was working with the SG, the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Education only, and sometimes with the Minister of Housing. But that was not these issues. But when the governance is from President, Secretary, Minister of Finance, Minister of Education. Those are my second. So those people were assisting me there and there, and then they know that we can able to move forward. But there was no teamwork. That was the only team that was working. The rest, they put the tools down and said, I'll give the as big as he will see what to do. Then we had to come up with things to be able to survive. Chao, what are you doing?
Hey, man. Can I come in,
Okay,
Jerome?
you are now also making me laugh here.
In the conclusion is that we survived. And what made us to survive this pandemic is that we're called. You see, when you can do 90% of your work in your office, that you have done everything, you have communicated with everyone, you have assisted student. When you left the office, you receive a call, right? You are useless. That meant you not to sleep to say, I don't want to wake up being useless tomorrow. I just want to work 100%. That made the investor better to go to exam, conclude its own exam of first semester and focus on second semester. And we're continuously going to, because now the data we've donated for 1 million is finished now. Now I was planning with the secretary to donate another money because we must be able to move forward. This money belongs to students. I mean, what can I do with it? Because the money is for students. I must donate another 1 million to able to take those who can't come back. Because remember, in level 1, but we are not in 100% capacity. We still have people who are doing final year who are participating online. And remember, the minister has announced a hybrid learning, the combination of face-to-face and online. So these things are going to live with it until COVID disappears, or else we may as well choose to focus, because I think it's bad. It's not that students need support with data and gadget, and that NSF can always provide. I mean, the government can always provide. The issue of online learning is effective. And then now they're even bringing the issue of fourth industrial revolution, which means in our villages we'll have connectivity there. Then there'll be no one who's left out. Then we can be able to move forward. But it needs a mindset that is prepared. It does not need anyone. That's what I'm saying. We have these leadership skills that you can even Google the whole night. You can't get in internet. We're born with it. You understand? It's the reason we survive these things. Thank you very much.
Okay, but that does speak to, I mean, and I'm going to ask this to all of you. I mean, you're mentioning these challenges, and you're mentioning how students would call you in the middle of the night. You're mentioning how you then need to make these personal sacrifices, right? To be able to support the constituency that you use, right? That you serve, rather. So I'm going to ask you very quickly. There's quite a few student affairs practitioners, executive directors, and so on in the call, and university officials. Upon reflection, and we have like less than 10 minutes left. So upon reflection, how do you think universities could have better supported student leaders at this time? So if you were to think back upon your own experience, and maybe if I'm just going to ask each one of you if you can think of one or maybe two things at the most, because we don't have time, but how could universities have supported you better? What is the lesson for me as a Dean of Student Affairs, for other student affairs professionals and university staff sitting in the hall? How could we support you better?
Okay, thank you for that.
I don't know who's going to go first.
Let me just
Steve,
conclude,
go for it.
I've already in a podium. I just want to conclude so that when I sit down and listen to what like when others.
You will switch yourself off in concluding. So can you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yeah. So just quickly, how could you...
I'm illiterate when it comes to these things of technology. I'm learning, I'm aligning myself.
Sure.
Yes, what I'm trying to say is that ourselves, when these things of online began, or it was introduced, or the visitors announced that we are now moving to online, we had a problem. Our problem was that we were not meeting each other with the management. And then when our student affairs director started meeting us halfway with our demand and how they think we can run, we started having to survive a lot of things, to achieve a lot of things, until we were even able to go and write exams, tests, remember, assessment. And I remember the issue of assessment, it was a serious issue. Our DVC academic has released a schedule that the test must start online and online. But we ask him, they are starting online. You are addressing on your department only. You are not addressing on your student support issues. How are the student going to get gadgets to participate in tests? How is student going to get data to participate? Because teams need 1 gig per hour whatsoever. How are they going to, because what we told them is simple, and they did the same exactly what we told them. Go back to your offices, you sit down, you align student support with your schedule like this. They must not move like, they must move directly like this. It's therefore we can be able to move forward. They went back and did the same thing, then we were able to move forward. Nobody was complaining about not having a data. Nobody was complaining about the issue of gadgets, even though now we're still waiting for those gadgets. Blade promised, it is dragging up and down. We don't know, maybe Saus ate the man with tower, we don't know, but the money is not there. We're waiting for tender. The tenders is collapsing every day, but we are hoping we'll go the gadget. But all the management and student leadership must meet each other. We must not put each other under the bus or set each other for fail, because this achievement are both of us. I mean, when I achieve, even the university is achieving. Now students have written exam and got the result. I mean, the university is moving forward. Now we're sitting here, man.
Thank you.
UKZN has not even started with their first semester exam. I mean, what's that?
Hectic. Okay, thank you, Gift. Tuto, how could the university, thinking back now, how could one or two things could the university have supported you better as a student leader?
Sure, thanks, Dean. So when this question you asked it, I remembered when we welcomed first year students early in the year. And I said to first years that they must not think that WITS is as glorious as it is depicted to be. WITS itself is in all of the crises that we have identified here as student leaders, because the misconception about WITS arises because it is situated in an urban area. Now, what happened this time around is that a university which is situated in urban areas had now to move to rural areas, because in the main, the students that are at the institution are from rural areas, you know? So all of those students had now to move from your Braamfontein lights, had to move away from your Braamfontein Wi-Fi and all of that, and had to go to the rural area. So that misconception that is all glorious is something that must be dealt with as well. But how student leaders could have been supported effectively, I think Gift touched on it. The fact that as a student leader, you must be engaged in conversations of yourself representing students, but you must also be engaged in other conversations. One, I remember there was a time where we had to sit in a 3-hour-long meeting, and there was classes in between. Yes, it was just a mess, you know? And I think Katleho mentioned it earlier on about sacrifices, but the university's support to student leaders is of paramount importance, because student leaders, if they cannot be part of the engagements, council, senate, student forum, and all of those things, it's a problem. So the first point, and I think WITS attempted to address it, is where student leaders must be ensured that they are involved in these things. If a student leader is in a rural area like myself, if I'm from Morokwe, there's no Wi-Fi there. There must be data provided for student leaders. So the material environments of student leaders must be considered in all of this, in these things. But secondly, I think we must do more as institutions of higher learning to address the mental health and mental wellness of student leaders, because like Gift says, we get calls at random times of the day to say, Chief, this is what is happening. Sometimes we hear very traumatic things. I hear these traumatic things in a village in the Northwest. There is no psychologist there. There is none of those things in those particular areas. So the second point is with regards to the mental wellness of the student leaders, because I think it's very important, because we hear very traumatic things that are very important,
Thank you.
But thirdly, just general academics of the student leaders. The university must do a lot. In fact, I think all institutions have a duty to try and support student leaders with their academics, because we have a chant at SASCO where we say we can chant and pass it, they say, but it will not be reflected if the university itself does not put its resources in supporting student leaders with their academics. All of these things that cannot assume that a student leader can go to class like any other normal student, write a test, So those three aspects for me are very important. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. I am so sorry that I'm having to rush all of you, but I do want to respect our time. There's already calls in the chat. I see someone saying a second webinar is needed because there's still so much to touch on. Katlego, I'm going to come to you on the same. No, you've already spoken, I think, on this question. And Tassan, can I come to you? And then we'll end off with Thabo.
All right. Thank you, Dean. I think my colleagues have already alluded a lot about mental wellness as well as academic excellence. When online learning started in our university, unfortunately, I got left behind because at home it's a shack and we don't have network coverage that is sufficient enough for me to connect to online learning. As a result, I was left behind with the entire teaching block. So when I got back to campus, it meant that I needed to catch up on the academics. I needed to orientate myself on systems that have already been put in place. So obviously, my mental health took a hard knock to a point where I even thought of deregistering as well as resigning from the SLC. But what has kept me going, Mr. Jerome, is how I've managed to voice out my frustration or even my hurt as a student leader. Because the notion that student leaders are superheroes, it's a lie. We're not. We are human beings. We've got emotions. We get frustrated. And for the fact that you take in all the students' emotions, you absorb everything that students go through. If a student calls you, like Tutu has mentioned, if a student calls you from a traumatic experience, you absorb that. As a result, your academics also get affected. So maybe the support that is currently needed in higher education institutions is that when student leaders are elected, assign mentors for those student leaders from the first day of office. Assign psychosocial support for those student leaders. Don't focus only on the SFC because we've got other student leaders in different structures. Assign mentors, assign psychosocial support. What our institution did through the Student Affairs Division is that all the students in our institution got assigned to mentors. These are coaches, everybody support staff, so that you can have someone that you can reach out to. So as a student leader, you also need to take care of yourself first as a student, then everything else will become easy for you. You can carry the burden of having other students on your back when you have taken good care of yourself. If you're not functioning well, the entire council collapses, the entire student population suffers. So you need to be there for yourself, be your own cheerleader. Like I've mentioned before, Dean, that you cannot serve from an empty cup. So if you're having hardships, define those hardships, be real with yourself, look at yourself in the mirror and say that, honestly, I'm having a hard time, therefore I need to take a moment away. Like Atara has mentioned, that they give each other space. So that is what we need in education institutions, to have a moment where you are real with yourself and even vent out what you are feeling. Because we keep quiet for a very long time, the next thing you collapse or even end up in hospital because of depression or anxiety. So we need to be real with ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the honesty with all of you. Katleho, do you have anything to add to how you think universities could have supported you better?
Thank you very much, Dean. I think I struggle so much with this question because when you're focused too much on helping the students, you tend to compromise yourself. So this is one question that the DVC academic roles has asked us, and none of us had any idea how they could support us, you know. So I don't know, except for what Desang mentioned, like with regards to having mentors or like, I don't know, man. I don't know, Dean. Like, honestly, I don't know how we can be supported. Maybe you can give us money.
Maybe you can give us money. We'll talk to your dean and see. Tabo, I know your context is, of course, slightly different in that as SAUS, you're not necessarily linked to the university in itself. But how could, whether it's DHEAD or your institution or a body of institutions, do you think there's stuff we could have done as a system to support you as SAUS leaders better? And what might one or two of those things be?
Thanks, Jerome. I think there were just two questions that you had asked, but I'll start with this one in particular. Sure. And try to be brief.
Go for it.
Firstly, I think I want to agree with President Katleho that, you know, it's hard to imagine how could universities, you know, supported better in the absence of money. And it's important, the thing of money, right, to be able to expand your particular services as a governance structure, right? The communication, the data, because more often than not, you know, we're forgetting that by sending students home, you took away many of the facilities that, you know, you think students take for granted, but pretty much where students rely on them for. You know, labs, Wi-Fi, and all these particular things. So in the absence, you know, universities have different budgets, SRC's leaders have different budgets, different limitations. It becomes a very challenging thing. But I think what is important, Jerome, is to highlight the fact that it was cowardice, I think, and must be placed on record, it was cowardice and reckless of the universities to send students as a first prerogative back home packing. Because the universities, especially even when I think about a historically advantaged university, it has the capacity to better service those particular students. And I'll come to WITS in particular. There's a very tragic scenario, and you can correct me, but I take it from online framed by WITS institution, where I think it's a student, the student who was murdered in Eastern Cape, the young lady Kwasa, if I'm not mistaken. If I recall correctly, I think the SRC president of WITS at some point, maybe a month ago, had put on social media that Kwasa was one of the students who wrote to the institution begging to come back because for whatever unconducive environment back at home. And for whatever reason, the university said no, right? The result of which is a young woman who is murdered in the Eastern Cape. I'm not saying that WITS murdered a student directly, because gender-based violence is more, you know, it's centered around, you know, men and the toxic masculinity in our country. But I'm saying that by the universities closing the doors of learning, literally, and shifting online, you know, it took students back to, when you're asking about mental health now, you took a time when you sent him back to his state of depression in the villages, back to a state of hopelessness, because we are told, go to university to get your qualifications so that you can become better human beings, right? But in the middle of a global pandemic where I need access to healthcare in terms of the clinics, you know, in your universities, whereas when you're sending me back at home, it's one clinic that must service the entire village, right, in a global pandemic. So you've taken me away from, you know, access to healthcare. You talk about mental health, you know, someone, I think it's Tutu was saying somewhere in the villages that there's no psychologist, it's in your university. In fact, even in the university space, you see the number of suicides yearly. We don't even have enough capacity to service mental health, but even where it was needed the most, those particular services were even made unavailable for the most part. How this has shaped me as a leader, I think holistically, it's tragic, you're right. And I think it's more tragic for me as a national leader, because what all of the panelists are not telling you, Jerome, is that when all of the students are calling them and they are struggling to get some of these responses, the end result is them calling me. A gift will harass me at 1 a.m. At 2, we have many phone calls with 2 at 1 a.m. with Gift at 1, 2 a.m. because we're trying to resolve a looming crisis. And Gift mentioned something very interesting, that this quick, and it's an appeal to students really, and I put it on record. You must stop this habit of, just criticizing for the sake of criticizing when you're not getting your immediate solutions, and you're saying things like, it's a thing, you are useless. And meetings for 10 hours at night, voluntary so, right? I'm not getting paid to be in these particular meetings, leading authentically, trying to ensure that while I study at the University of Pretoria, I don't have an issue with Wi-Fi and data at the University of Pretoria. Quite frankly, UP has access to resources to fully run, its academic project online. Yet a Tabo must still show up in a particular meeting and argue for the student at Walter Sisulu University who won't even get the media platform. So it was an interesting thing. I'm a spokesperson by profession. Now, to be able to balance out the narratives, right? Because it's your VITs, your UPs, and your UCTs, which have proximity to the media, right? A gift must first go and burn a table and a tire for 14 weeks on end, and somebody must die before somebody can say, oh, at the University of Venda, there's a crisis, right? So for me as a leader, to be able to now, I had to speak for 26 different universities while being a student myself. So I'm a student first. I have my own issues. The lockdown is affecting me, myself, being locked down in a room for 5 months. I'm also a human being, right? Trying to resolve all of these competing issues, I'm realizing that, in fact, student leaders are not being taken seriously in the context of COVID. They argue that, many are saying that it allowed them to think differently. I argue conversely. In fact, it exacerbated how they were even being undermined, because you become student leaders who are reduced to formalities. You are in the Zoom meeting, therefore you counted as being there. But they don't mention that you were muted in the entire time when you became anarchic, right? When you're challenging the system. So there are many ways in which we realize that the whole idea of mobilization, we mustn't think students are hooligans. Somebody was saying in the comment section that there are other ways of resolving dispute without protesting. I said it's nonsensical, right? Protest is part and parcel of a thought out means to achieve a particular end. You don't just wake up one day and think you're going to protest. You've tried to argue, you've tried to debate, you're calling a VC, is not responding for 3 weeks, you're SMSing, they're not responding for 2 weeks. The end result is your frustration, trying to resolve students. Let us mobilize and get a mass base. Fees must fall survive because of the mass base, right? But now if you've sent all of the students home, a result of which is a Tabo, a national leader whose number appears on a statement, right? Who must now answer a call about someone who's frustrated because of something happening at WITS, at Road, at Unifin, at Wusu. I'm just one human being. So I think even that alone has been very challenging and very tricky. I can imagine for not just myself, for student leaders. So I think it's not even about student leaders, even for students themselves. How could universities have better serviced their students, right? Because at the end of the day, that we have things like your missing middle student that we don't even talk about. Even in the solutions that were coming about in the COVID-19, we spoke about NSFAS, we provided laptops for NSFAS students, we provided SIM cards for NSFAS students, we chased everyone out of res, we didn't adjust the residence fees, right? NSFAS students don't have to complain because their education is free. In any case, the state is paying. But a Tabo at Wits University, who is in the missing middle category, who for the last 5 months has just been left to fend for himself, who his mother probably lost their job from recession because lockdown level 1, who is now caught in a predicament whereby there were no solutions being afforded or even spoken about because of the missing middle student, where the NSFA system is closed down. So it exposed some of the systemic weaknesses, I think, for me, but it also allowed me to grow as an individual and hopefully to be able to say, maybe I think I've reached a point whereby it needs new people, right? I can't be having the same conversation, fees must fall, 2015, the same conversation about inequality with the same individuals, right? And nothing seems to give. So the road ahead is quite scary, it's quite interesting. The idea that even post-COVID, we might be going back to the same system we came back to is something that as student leaders, we must be able to, begin to challenge quite aggressively to say we can't go back to life post-COVID. We can't go back to those sets of inequalities. It has been exacerbated. In fact, the 2020 academic year has been highly compromised, if we're to be honest, for many institutions and for many students. And we need to reflect deeply and honestly at all levels so that we don't repeat these particular mistakes in the future and that we're able to gradually make those positive assessments. But lastly, and it's a call for all of us, I'm calling out even myself, included yourself, Jerome, the panelists, right, is the overvaluing of universities and the undervaluing of TVET colleges, right, who probably would have been the hard hit of the COVID-19 pandemic, because we look to our universities, right? When UP and vets and all of these things are writing their things online, when Tabo's appearing, spokesperson of SAWS, of universities speaking, who is speaking on behalf of TVET colleges, who is speaking on behalf of those students who, don't have any voice representation. No media goes to those particular institutions to try and meaningfully understand. So tomorrow, I know when we're commemorating 5 years since fees must fall, I know, for instance, student organizations, the South African Students Congress, for instance, has centered tomorrow around a National Day of Action, positioning TVET colleges as an institution of choice. And it's a lobby that I'm even, it should not just, although it's run by a particular organization, it should not be a partisan issue, because the future of any developing country really rests in your TVET sector. And if those are not your institutions of choice, and if no resources are put into those particular institutions, the end result is a country that is going to be forever in its developmental phase and failing to advance into its next level. So those short few words, I'd like to thank you for the discussion, and also the panelists and the questions. I think it's been really thought-provoking, and I agree that a second conversation is definitely needed.
Those short words, ne?
I know, spokesperson vibes.
So we are over time, and I am mindful not only of the times of or the commitments that participants might have, but also your own commitments, because we did ask you for 90 minutes only, and we are now beyond that. There's a lot of love coming through in the chat room for all of you. People are saying, you student leaders have done so much, well done during the pandemic. Respect to all student leaders, you guys are massive. Tabu and Tutu, love both of your analysis of the different groups that have been affected by the pandemic. Sorry, now it moved. Again, great job, student leaders, the work you have done so far. Continue doing is tremendous under the given circumstances. Well done, keep up the good work. So lots of love coming through for you guys. When you are done, I will tell, I'm gonna formally close and thank, but I will then also announce our last webinar, which is next week. And then I will also give an indication of who the speaker for our last webinar will be. So I hope people will stay, because it's, for me at least, it's quite a special one. But could I ask in closing, and I'm really asking you 1 minute at the most, 1 minute at the most, each one of you, as a way of closing. If you were to remain in the reflective space, what would you say is that one thing? And I'm deliberately asking one thing. What is that one thing that as a student leader you take from your journey? So all of you, you've come to the end of your student leadership journeys, or it will soon be over. But what is that one thing? Like that one thing, if you think about this year, and it might be tough because you're still in it, but for where you are now, that one thing that you take from this experience. And I'm going to ask you to be really brief and quick, but I think it would be quite useful just in terms of our learning and of your own learning, your own journey, that one thing. Who wants to lead us on that one thing that you take from this journey? Shall we start now? Okay, I was going to say, let's start national and work our way back, because we worked from the institutions to national. Tabo, the one thing you take from this journey? We can't hear you, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was saying it's a tricky one, because there are many things I want to think about. But I think
one thing
that I take away is that the fight for free quality education in this country is a fight that still needs to continue. It's a fight that we need to imagine in different ways beyond the question of fees and fees alone. There are many things around free education and the quality, the access, the whole roundedness of the discourse tends to be abandoned the moment we resolve, in technical terms, the fees issue. We forget about the many other ways in which the system is violent towards students. I think something to take away from this whole experience for me is that the fight for free quality education is very much an alive fight, and it's up to the next generation. It's not going to happen overnight. Theirs is to just take it, to the next step, and the next step. And so the fight still needs to continue 5 years later, perhaps even robustly so.
Gift, the one thing you take from your experience as a student leader?
Yes. Can I come?
Yes,
Can you?
we can hear you.
Thank you very much. I told you about the network from vendor, you know. What I can say is that what I'm telling them is that actually we have learned a lot in our leadership journey, but now I can able to negotiate, and negotiation can open every door you come
Yeah.
across. As long as you can able to negotiate, you can negotiate for yourself, you can negotiate for people you are representing, because remember, in a struggle, as a Tawes or that you will not win everything. It is step by step, step by step. And in a higher learning of institution, they'll always tell you that this is not possible. Out of these 90 people who are academically excluded, we can only able to take 50 because the other 40 are not meeting requirement. Then you must be able to adjust and adapt to that no, this is what's happening. So you must be able to adapt also to changes, because if we were not going to, if we had failed to adapt to COVID-19, our institution was going to be closed. We were going to be home and nothing moving like UKZN and other institution we don't want to mention. You understand? So you must be able to negotiate, and then you must always research about matters on how we can able to move forward. Then you are going to survive.
Thank you for that. Tuto, the one thing you take from this experience? President Tuto.
Yes, Dean. Thank you.
Yes, the
So,
one thing you take from this experience.
So when we did our last reflections a week ago, we highlighted, because we are outgoing, so we did our last reflections online and we highlighted some of the victories that we made. And that gave me a sense of, one, never to undermine the impact that you have in whatever space that you occupy. Or whatever little thing that you do, whatever little thing that you say, there is someone out there who you are touching, and there is someone out there who's relating to what you do or say. But secondly, it's quite related to what Thabo said, that the revolution, I will term it that, is a process and it can never be achieved overnight. He speaks of free education as a broad term, but I termed it a revolution because I think in all aspects, when we highlighted some of the things we did a few weeks ago, we realized, or no, but actually there is quite a lot that we did. And there is quite a lot that is still coming, and ours is to encourage both ourselves and whoever we are going to hand over to say, carry on the baton and know that you do your part and not downplay yourself to think that you have not achieved what you were supposed to, because not everything will be achieved overnight. Thank you very much, Dino.
Thank you.
Dino, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Katleho, the one thing you take from this experience? Unmute.
Yes, thank you very much, Dean. I think the previous three speakers have captured me, but just to add on what they said, I think approach is very important. The manner in which you approach situations, the manner in which you approach the management or the people that you're representing is very much important, because it's the one thing that will define the results that you will be getting from that. So I think I've learned that approach is very important. And yeah, another thing, like just to wrap up, I think one other thing that I really appreciated for this is that the opportunity that COVID-19 has presented us with, and I don't think that's something that we have taken advantage of, where we were supposed to be looking at what has been working, what isn't working, and what can we do about it. So I think this is one opportunity that I think we are not really taking advantage of. So thank you very much for this. It has been an honor to be part of this panel discussion.
Thank you. Ntesang, you will be the last one, and then I will do the formalities and announce who the next speaker will be. Ntesang?
Thank you, Dean. In my culture, Rare, the last is the big shot.
Amen, absolutely.
Dean, one thing that I'm taking from my leadership journey is learning how to be kind to myself. And learning how to be kind to myself includes realizing the support systems that I have in my life, realizing or recognizing people that I have in my life that are rooting on my behalf, because I am spiritually rooted in the Word of God. I usually say that people who are praying on my behalf, people who are praying for me when I can't pray for myself, and people who are praying with me when it is difficult for me to handle. So this leadership journey has taught me that I do not have to do life alone, man. I've learned to reach out to even people that I've never met, like Katli has been my support system. Tuto, we've once had a conversation about my mental health and how to respond to issues in our university. So what I've learned is reach out when you're not okay. Whether you are a president or national spokesperson, reach out when you're not okay. So that's what I've learned, to be kind to
Thank
myself.
you. Thank you. Could I just say, I mean, we are probably all rushing to leave, but I think it is important for us to acknowledge your role and contribution over this year. What you've done, what you've been able to do, the reflections that you shared with us today speaks to people who are truly, truly committed, not only to your own campuses, not only to your own constituency, but to the development of our country, to the furtherance of our goals as a country. And I really, really want to salute you for having walked this journey. I know when COVID happened, and I'll speak for myself, when I was listening to the scientists and people predicting what's going to happen, and I look at the pictures coming out from Italy, for example, which was just the scary stuff. I must say, at a personal level, it was the personal fears. And I'm sure you confronted that at some point. But all of you in your own spaces, you've done the best that you could to serve your constituency. And I really, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you have done. These webinars, we're doing them because we want to provide a platform for the development of young leaders, for the development of students, ultimately in service of our nation and in service of the world. And so, having listened to you, I have no doubt in my mind that this is only the start of your amazing leadership journeys. So all the best, and thank you to each one of you for having joined us here today, for sharing so generously, for digging deep into yourself, to share, to be frank, to contribute to our understanding of this world. And I look forward to watching all of your journeys as they unfold. And I look forward to us perhaps having another conversation like this in the near future, hopefully in person. You can come to Wits and we'll put you in the Great Hall and we'll fill it up and we'll continue. Participants, thank you so much for having joined us. This is the 7th of our webinar conversations. There were lots of questions about where can I get access to the material, where can I get access to this conversation, because people want to just go through it again because there was so much fire coming through from our leaders. The conversation was recorded. Each one of you who have registered for this conversation will automatically receive a link to it. You can download it and keep it for yourself. But once, as Wits, we have also set up the leadership platform where all of these webinars, the videos will eventually be posted. We will also let you know so that you can link into all the conversations that we've had to date. I've learned a lot. I thank you for having shaped me and for having contributed also to my personal development. We have one more speaker left. Our next speaker, I hope, will stimulate a lot of interest It's going to be a very interesting conversation. It's our final one for this year. As I ask Tembi, who's been wonderful in supporting us, to put up the slide and reveal to you who our next speaker will be. It is none other than the Vice Chancellor of the University of Witwatersrand, Professor Adam Habib. We invite all of you for this leadership conversation for an hour of learning. He, as you know, will share frankly his insights, and this conversation will be facilitated by the SRC Deputy President. So a student will be in charge of the conversation, and we thank you all again for having joined us. Have a wonderful evening. Panelists, your gifts are in the mail to say thank you to each one of you. You've been fantastic. You've been wonderful. Bless you and have a good night.
Why would you make us? Thank you very much, Jerome.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerome.
So
You can
plug
move the slide.
university.
When am I coming to Venda?
Must ask
You guys are
Catherine.
such typical student leaders. You're meant to keep quiet now. but visits must happen, yes.
Sorry? What's Jerome saying?